Many of you are aware of what social thinking is, but for those of you who are not familiar with it, I was able to ask Michelle Garcia-Winter, who is the leading national expert in social thinking, what is social thinking and why is it so important to so many kids who have disabilities?
And if you want to learn more about social thinking, you can go to Michelle Garcia-Winter's website, which is www.socialthinking.com.
What is social thinking?
Social thinking is a process through which we figure out what's expected of us. So social thinking is what our brains do to take in what's the situation, who are the people, and how do I interpret what's going on around me. But we don't just do social thinking for our social behaviors in terms of like, what do I need to do social skills wise. We use social thinking to interpret what's on television, watching the news, what message are they trying to sell me, watching a sitcom, watching a sports game. We're rooting for teams, we're trying to figure out what's going on. So I think in short, social thinking is our meaning maker. It helps us provides us with information about people's social intentions and emotions, including our information as well as others, to help us make sense of what's going on, how we're being perceived, how we're interpreting others.
And why is social thinking so important for some of our students who have disabilities, whether it's an autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, learning difficulties, where social skills may be a little bit more challenging? Why is it so important?
So social thinking, we could describe it as a process of just understanding what our brains do prior to engaging in our social skills. Social thinking is also the name of a treatment methodology that I've created. And so when you say, why is it important for kids with disability? It's kind of two things. It's a process our minds go through, but what I've done through my treatment methodology is really broken down and explained through a lot of different lessons for little kids starting at 3.5, 4, all the way up through your oldest adult. But when we're coming to folks with learning differences who have social learning problems, and what I describe as that is people who are not being able to adapt effectively, because the way I define social, like social skills, what are social skills is we say people have good social skills when they adapt effectively, and we describe someone with poor social skills when they're not adapting very effectively. So when we're helping folks with learning differences who have language, because this is specifically for students who have reasonable language to gifted language and learning abilities, and then we use language and visual explanation to help break down what's happening in our mind and the minds of others and the situation to figure out what's expected from our social behaviors or our social responses.
How does a parent sort of take the first steps of teaching their own children social thinking and have their school program or this child's IEP support these types of learning?
So that's a way more hairy question than it sounds like, because let me back up and explain. Social thinking, being that it's our big interpreter and helps us make sense of being with other people and how to respond to people and understand what's expected of us, is what everyone expects for a kid who's just sitting in a group in a classroom. That in a group of, even if you're not interacting with 20 or 30 kids, you're supposed to understand what your expectations are. But the other side of it is social thinking is also used to interpret reading comprehension in a classroom. It's used when you have to figure out, what should I be writing on this essay? How will people be interpreting what I'm writing? So social thinking goes right into social academics, and I have free articles on that on my website, which is socialthinking.com, under What's Social Thinking. So there's a big connection to the core curriculum. So that's one of the ways in which we can help bring it into school, is by showing how social thinking is embedded in the Common Core standards. And that's too much probably information for a short interview, but that's one side of the question.
I'm really glad Michelle brought up the Common Core, because most states are moving in the direction of the Common Core, and we're not here to argue the Common Core. But it is important for you to know as a parent that if you're consulting with your team about whether or not social thinking is something you want to incorporate, pointing out the ways in which supporting that social thinking and those social skills can assist a student with disabilities in attaining the Common Core standards is a really important way to get there.
Absolutely.
One of the things I've learned over the years, I'm trained as a speech pathologist, but I've now been involved in teaching all mental health team members, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, anyone who works in a school. I've been involved in businesses and helping them with social thinking. And one of the things I've learned is there's not a single profession out there that works with people directly that's actually trained in social learning or social cognition as part of their strong tool bag. So people may receive training, but it's because they've pursued it as a specialty and not because it's part of a core curriculum. We have a belief, not only in our society, but as I travel internationally across most cultures and societies, that social is something that we don't have to actively attend to. It should just show up so that we can teach the serious stuff. And what the gap in that belief is that people really haven't studied or understand that the social learning processes children go through from birth, in the playground, play in preschool, is helping kids learn how to problem solve, learning how to negotiate, understand people's points of view, how to do conflict resolution. And all those experiences they're having in the social world are not only helping them figure out how to refine their social behaviors with others, but it's also giving them the mindset of understanding perspective and point of view, which will help them access understanding lessons in sociology, English language arts, written expression, as we were talking about. So it's easy to point fingers at the problem. It's not so easy to cite the source of the problem, other than to say across societies, because social shows up in most typically developing kids so easily without any direct teaching, it's just what we expect. I jumped in there just, kind of being in the right time and right place, because this is when we first acknowledged Asperger's in 1994. Right. It was the first time we took a really serious look at, hey, there's some really bright people out there who have strong academic intelligence and really limited social intelligence, but we don't have a way to measure social intelligence, because even the psychologists bagged out on measuring social intelligence in a way that's common. So it's a real frustration for parents, but it's not just parents. It's a frustration for administrators,
absolutely,
for teachers, as everyone, most people want the best for kids. Right. But there's so few tools out there to even rip apart and explain the social process.
Right. And so I think that, it's a good point that you make. It's schools, not just public, are less equipped to deal with it because it is a new sort of exploding, emerging field. It's not licensed, it's not credentialed, and people are clamoring at all of your curriculum and products to try to teach it. And so it's not that it's somebody's fault. It's really, how do we help schools and educators and interventionists understand it so they can teach it with fidelity, and that it actually makes a difference in someone's life.
And as a therapist, I work out of San Jose, California in my own clinic, and then I consult and travel all over. But I'm working a lot with adults, transition to adults and adults. So I'll also have to say it's not just schools, it's police officers, it's HR departments. I work a lot in the business world with HR departments that have no training on social learning, and then they see, one of the common sayings in the business world is we hire you for your skills and we fire you for your behaviors. And so now we come back to going, okay, let's anchor on this, and let's understand that we've got some pretty, reasonably bright, typically developing learners, kids with learning disabilities, to working with really gifted kids. So what's their strength? Their strength is language and having some ability to learn more concrete information. So if we're going to teach the abstraction of social, and I'm obviously biased, but as I've studied this so much, I would argue that teaching social abilities, social thinking and related social skills to someone not born to that knowledge, there probably is not anything more complex than trying to teach that to a person not born to it.
Right.
And so now, how do we begin teaching? So we're going to go to the idea that a lot of our folks who lack the social understanding have some very logical thinking, and they have language, because we're only using social thinking with kids with language. Now we're going to create, how do we break down understanding? What is perspective taking? How do we keep our bodies in the group? What is communication? How can we break that down? And for 4 steps of communication, what's a person, what do you know about a person? What are they thinking? What's your body doing? What's your eyes doing? And how to use language to relate to others. And so we keep breaking it down because we believe, and I think the research strongly supports this, to teach our folks, we've got to give them something to hold on to that makes sense to them, which is logical, linear chunks that as they're learning them, we keep adding the next level of complexity.
We realize that once you start learning about social thinking, the concept of putting together a social thinking program for your child or for a child that you're working with can seem a bit daunting.
Where to begin, where to begin? Well, we suggest you go to socialthinking.com, where there are all sorts of publications, articles, and materials that you will find to help you get started in the process.